What if we've been looking in the wrong direction from the very beginning? What if all those loud words about demilitarization, denazification, and other so-called noble missions of Putin's Russian world were just a smokescreen? What if even conquering Ukraine wasn't the ultimate primary objective? Look, from the very beginning we were told this would be a swift, decisive, and victorious war, that Kyiv would fall in just 3 days, and that NATO would withdraw in a state of total panic. But time goes on, the war doesn't end, and the number of victims keeps growing. And despite Ukraine enduring immense and widespread suffering, the one significant thing that is currently undergoing a transformation beyond all recognition is Russia itself. But what if the so-called special military operation was never really about territory, but was planned from the start as a tool to completely reshape Russia itself? After all, Russians were told that this was a war against the West. But why are they the ones under pressure? Why are some Russians being sent to prison, others to the front lines, and still others into utter poverty? Why is it that now the word peace is considered extremism, and any criticism of the authorities can cost you your freedom? What if all of this isn't just a bunch of random side effects, but a carefully planned process? I'm absolutely convinced that Putin used the special military operation not to finally defeat Ukraine, but to defeat Russia itself. And now I'm gonna prove it to you. But first, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell to get notifications about new videos. Please do not forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. By doing so, you help support and promote this video. And if you want to support the creator, check out Patreon and buy me a coffee. All the links are in the description and the first comment. When those in power start a war, they always have two fronts. The first is the external one, the one they talk about in the news, draw arrows on maps for, and tell stories of heroic victories. And the second is the internal front. And this front is more important because it's where it gets decided whether anyone will stand in the way of those in power doing whatever they want. The so-called special military operation became the perfect excuse to crack down on those who still dared to object. The opposition in Russia had long been weak, but 2022 showed that it was meant to be finished off for good. Navalny was not just a political prisoner. He was a symbol that, in Russia, it was possible to speak the truth and resist. While he was in prison, the authorities weren't in a hurry to kill him. But after the war began, it became clear his very existence, even behind bars, was a threat to the regime. First, he was completely isolated, and then he was demonstratively destroyed, with the authorities choosing a convenient moment for it. And this was not an exception, but the culmination of a large-scale purge. All liberal media outlets have been shut down or are operating in exile. The last independent politicians have either left, are imprisoned, or are simply no longer alive. Repression has become total. Now, not only activists end up in the defendant's seat, but even random people who happen to say the wrong words. Before, it was still possible to protest, to shout, even to take to the streets. Now, Russia is a country of complete silence. Some genuinely support the war, others do so out of necessity, and still others are simply afraid to say anything against it. But most importantly, now there's not even the illusion left that anyone can challenge the authorities. After all, the so-called special military operation first and foremost destroyed not the mythical Nazis in Ukraine, nor the collective West. It destroyed in Russia the very possibility of resistance, and drove out of the country, or took the lives of, the last remnants of conscience, reason, and humanity. Every major conflict requires the mobilization not only of the army, but also of the collective minds of the people. But if before, Russian propaganda could be called unrefined and simplistic, but not all-encompassing, now it is a total reality in which the entire country lives. The special military operation has given the regime a carte blanche for everything. Any reform, any ban, any tightening of the screws is now justified by the war. Censorship has reached an absolute level. Now, even the most private of conversations can result in a lengthy prison sentence. Propaganda has become so overwhelmingly pervasive that even those who clearly see through its lies are terrified to even appear to ignore it. The authorities have started using repression not just against activists, it has become a tool of governance. If you imprison one person, systematically intimidate 10, and 1,000 will remain completely silent on their own. Now, even silence itself can be a punishable criminal offense. Insufficient patriotism, a lack of public support, and a suspicious political stance, these vague and arbitrary accusations allow the authorities to effectively remove anyone. But perhaps the most frightening thing is how society is turning into a machine that suppresses itself. Informing on others has once again become the norm. Let's recall the case of the teenager who was turned in by his own father for an unpatriotic drawing, or the elderly woman whose neighbors reported her to the police for speaking about peace. Children are encouraged to inform on their parents, employees on their colleagues, and even ordinary citizens on each other. And this isn't just simple fear, it's a fundamental reprogramming of human consciousness. People aren't just afraid, they begin to genuinely believe that betraying others for the sake of the authorities is their highest form of patriotic duty. The Russia we once knew no longer exists. Now it's a country where the authorities don't just govern society, they've created a new type of citizen, for whom fear is the norm, war is a necessity, and freedom is a crime. The so-called special military operation isn't about defeating an external enemy. It's meant to ensure that no one inside Russia ever dares to say no again. According to various official government reports, the Russian economy is steadily expanding. GDP is continuing to rise, sanctions haven't dealt a crushing blow, and although the ruble is shaky, it is still holding on. Moreover, in numerous different regions of Russia, the war has actually become a significant social elevator. Defense factories are actively recruiting new workers, contract soldiers are earning significantly higher than average salaries, and the budgets of regions that used to struggle to maintain their basic budgets have suddenly filled with money. But what exactly is behind this rapid growth? This entire economic model relies solely and exclusively on the continuation of the war. The government pours billions into military contracts, and this money is redistributed among factories, contractors, logistics, and the military. Then it's spent again on weapons production, more drones are purchased, and salaries are once again sent to the mobilized soldiers. The money circulates within the system without creating anything new. Yes, the economy has adapted, but it has adapted to war, not to development. How many new technologies have been created in the past 2 years? Which specific sectors, in addition to the military, have shown significant and measurable growth? Which particular goods has Russian manufacturing been able to successfully and completely substitute? The answer to all these questions is disappointing. Outside of the military economy, there is degradation. Small and medium-sized businesses are either shutting down or barely surviving. Russians' incomes are only growing on paper. In reality, they're being eaten up by inflation and rising prices. Public sector workers, who used to have at least some significant influence and impact on the country's life, are now entirely and utterly dependent on the state, and therefore on the war. If the war continues, the economy will be able to sustain itself and hold out for a while longer, but at what cost? And if the war ends, what will be done with the tens of thousands of people who found social mobility through it? With the millions of workers employed at military factories? With the regional budgets tied to government contracts? The Russian economy is no longer able to exist without war. The special military operation has turned into a bloody locomotive that can't be stopped without disaster. And the Kremlin understands this. There are countries where war is a tragedy, and there are countries where war is an ideology. Russia has always loved the myth of the Great War, but if before the cult of war was built on the past, on grandfathers and parades, now it has become a new reality. Now, every Russian must not only believe in the war, but live it, Children march in military uniforms and build special military operation zones in schools. No one asks what you want to be anymore. Boys are only supposed to become soldiers, and girls are supposed to be mothers who give birth to soldiers. Virtually every single adult male is potentially subject to mobilization. Mobilization is no longer an emergency measure, but a way of life. Even if you're not at the front, you're in the reserves. Women are forced into the role of soldiers' wives. Have more children for the army, support your husband, and wait for the Cargo 200 with pride. The cult of death has replaced the cult of life. The reward for heroism is posthumous. The heroes are the ones who died. The best fate is to die for your motherland, not to live for it. You might ask, what is all this for? Militarization makes people controllable. The fear of mobilization keeps people from thinking about freedom. Propaganda makes people see war as the only meaning of existence. The more that ordinary people believe that war is a normal part of life, the longer the regime can sustain the conflict indefinitely. The so-called special military operation started as a mission, but turned into a way of life. Now it's not a temporary measure, but a new system. And the main goal of this system is to make sure Russians never remember what peace is. Russia has historically never functioned as a democratic country, but in the most recent several decades, the Kremlin at least created the illusion of a certain degree of progress. Now, even that illusion is no longer needed. The country has officially returned to the late Soviet Union mode, but with a much more primitive and brutal system of governance. The regions have completely lost their autonomy. Governors have turned into viceroys. Their primary responsibility is to guarantee the successful mobilization and consistently uphold military order. Questions of the economy, social policy, and development are now secondary. Cultural policy has been destroyed. Only ideology remains. Any independent thought is suppressed, and art has been turned into military propaganda. Theaters stage plays about the special military operation, movies tell stories of heroic deeds, and writers compete to see who can describe spiritual values more beautifully. Repression has become a way of life. If before, criticizing the authorities could just get you labeled a foreign agent, now you can end up behind bars for 20 years. Fear has become the main tool of governance. Russians are no longer citizens. They are a resource. The state can mobilize them, send them to war, use them as free labor, and then abandon them to their fate. The USSR had an idea, even if it was a false one, the building of a bright future. In today's Russia, there isn't even that. Here, all they build is endless war, endless mobilization, and endless submission. As one Russian official said, people are the new oil. The only difference is that at least the Kremlin used to sell oil abroad, while Russians are simply disposed of. Every war has its price. But the war that Putin started turned out to be a war not for Russia, but against it. At first, the propaganda claimed that the so-called special military operation was a battle for the country's future. At this very moment, even those words are entirely devoid of meaning, because Russia simply does not possess a future. There is no economy capable of existing without war. The entire system is built on mobilizing resources, people, business, and minds. If the war ends tomorrow, it will not bring a revival, but a collapse. There is no society that could restore itself. When millions of people inside the country genuinely believe that war is their destiny, who will build a peaceful Russia? There isn't even a state in the usual sense of the word. There is a deeply entrenched mechanism of systemic violence that keeps people in submission, but offers them absolutely nothing at all except the perpetual continuation of brutal war. Putin promised a great Russia, but built a country that can exist only as long as it continues to kill and continues to die. He subjugated it, took control, and closed off any space for choice. But how can you govern a country where there's no longer any development or meaning? Russia has ceased to be a subject of history. Now it is just a territory where the power machine grinds on endlessly. But what comes next? What happens when war becomes eternal and mobilization becomes the norm? When the economy is finally tied entirely to government contracts and the regions survive only because of the war? When fear stops working because people have nothing left to lose? What will happen when Putin himself becomes a hostage of a system that only knows how to wage war but doesn't know how to stop? Every single form of power that is constructed upon a foundation of fear eventually and inevitably falls victim to its own inherent darkness. Furthermore, any political system that relies heavily on the use of violence will one day start to consume and devour itself from within. And the main question facing us now isn't exactly when this will happen, but rather what will be left of the nation of Russia when it finally does. Thank you for your attention, friends. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss any new videos. Support the creator on Buy Me a Coffee and Patreon, where you'll find extra videos and early releases before the official premieres. Use YouTube's sponsorship feature, and be sure to send donations to the armed forces of Ukraine. Wishing all Ukrainians a swift victory.